I'm Rebecca, 32, female. I live in a quiet city, view apartment that has always been my sanctuary, a place of order and logic. As a data scientist, my world revolves around patterns, probabilities, and the clean, undeniable truth found in numbers. My life was stable, successful, and solitary, save for the most important person in it, my younger sister, Emily. But that carefully constructed world was about to be threatened by a man who believed love was a transaction and family was a weakness to be exploited. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The salt-laced air of the Hawaiian coast was supposed to be a balm, a gentle welcome to a new chapter for our family. Our family, that was me and Emily. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was 20 and she was 10. In that instant, I went from being a college student to a legal guardian. I traded late, night study sessions for parent-teacher conferences and fun weekends for budgeting and life insurance policies. Every decision I made, from my career choice to the apartment I rented, was centered around giving Emily the stability we had lost. Seeing her now at 22, standing on the pristine white sand with a radiant smile, made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. She was getting married. The wedding was an intimate affair at a luxury beachfront resort, a fantasy she'd always dreamed of. Her fiancé, Leo, had insisted on it. He was 25, impossibly handsome, and carried himself with the slick confidence of a man who had never known failure. He called himself an entrepreneur, dealing in vague but apparently lucrative online ventures. He'd swept Emily off her feet with grand gestures and promises of a life filled with adventure. I admit, I was wary. His charm felt too polished, his answers about his business too evasive. But Emily was smitten, convinced he was her soulmate, and I forced myself to trust her judgment. For her sake, I wanted to believe in him. I'd paid for the wedding, all of it. It was my gift to her, a way of officially passing the torch of her happiness into someone else's hands. The cost was exorbitant, far more than I was comfortable with, but Leo had a knack for upselling. Emily deserves the best, Rebecca, he'd say, his voice smooth as silk. This isn't just a wedding, it's the launch of our life together. It has to be perfect. I'd watch Emily's eyes light up, and my resolve would crumble. I signed the checks, wired the deposits, and told myself it was just money. The day before the wedding was a blur of final preparations. The floral arrangements, towering displays of white orchids and birds of paradise, were being set up on the ceremonial arch overlooking the turquoise water. Waitstaff in crisp white uniforms scurried about, and the gentle melody of a string quartet practicing drifted from the reception pavilion. I found a quiet moment on the balcony of my suite, watching the sun begin its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. I felt a pang of melancholy, the bittersweet feeling of an era ending. My job of raising her was done. A light knock on the adjoining door broke my reverie. It was Leo. He stepped onto the balcony, a champagne flute in hand, looking like a model from a resort catalog. "Quite the view, isn't it?" he said, leaning against the railing beside me. "You've really outdone yourself, Rebecca." "I just want Emily to be happy," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He took a slow sip of champagne, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Oh, she will be very happy, traveling, living the good life, the life I've been building for us." He turned to me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, but a life like that requires fuel, capital. I stiffened. "I've paid for the wedding, Leo. It's all taken care of. The wedding is just the stage," he said, his voice dropping. "I'm talking about the show. My businesses are on the verge of a major breakthrough, but I've hit a temporary liquidity issue. A small obstacle, really, just a matter of cash flow." He swirled the champagne in his glass, the setting sun glinting off the crystal. He looked directly at me, the charming facade melting away to reveal something cold and hard beneath. "I need $50,000, Rebecca, a wire transfer by morning." I stared at him, speechless. The request was so audacious, so utterly inappropriate, that I couldn't process it at first. "You're asking me for money the day before you marry my sister." His smile widened into a smirk. It was a predator's smile, confident and cruel. "Think of it as a final wedding gift, an investment in your sister's happiness. You pay the $50,000 for this luxury life to continue, or—" He paused, letting the unspoken threat hang in the humid air. "Or I vanish forever. I walk away from all of this, from her. Imagine Emily standing at that beautiful altar tomorrow, all alone. Imagine the humiliation, the heartbreak, it would crush her. My blood ran cold. He wasn't asking, he was blackmailing me. He was leveraging my love for my sister, the 12 years I had spent protecting her, against me. He saw my devotion not as a virtue, but as a vulnerability, a pressure point he could squeeze until he got what he wanted. The beautiful sunset, the gentle music, the scent of tropical flowers. It all became a grotesque backdrop to his ugly ultimatum. He had built this perfect paradise only to reveal that it was a cage, and he held the key. For a long moment I was frozen, the world tilting on its axis. The rhythmic crash of the waves on the shore sounded like a mocking countdown. Leo stood there, perfectly composed, his smirk unwavering. He had planned this, the timing, the location, the emotional stakes. It was a calculated move, designed for maximum impact and minimal resistance. He knew I wouldn't make a scene. He knew my primary instinct would be to protect Emily from any hint of pain. "You're a monster," I whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of the ocean. He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "I'm a pragmatist. Love is wonderful, but it doesn't pay for a suite at the Four Seasons or a first-class ticket to Bali. Money does. You're a data scientist, Rebecca. You understand numbers. This is just a simple equation. Your 50,000 buys her a lifetime of perceived happiness. A small price to pay, wouldn't you agree?" My mind was racing, sifting through options, scenarios, probabilities. Call his bluff. He seemed utterly confident, as if he had nothing to lose. If he walked, Emily would be devastated. The emotional fallout would be catastrophic, and she would likely blame me for driving him away. Pay him? It felt like rewarding a kidnapper. It would set a precedent, making me his personal ATM for life. And what guarantee did I have that he wouldn't just take the money and leave anyway? "Why should I believe you'll stay if I pay?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I was struggling to contain. "Because I love the lifestyle you can provide for me," he said with brutal honesty. "Emily is the beautiful key to the bank. As long as the bank is open, I'll treasure the key, but if the vault is empty..." He shrugged, finishing his champagne and placing the empty flute on the table with a soft clink. "The account details are on my phone. I'll text them to you. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't make this difficult, Rebecca, for her sake." He walked back into his suite, leaving me alone with the sickening truth. The man my sister was about to marry was a sociopath, a parasite who had attached himself to our family. He didn't love Emily. He loved what I could provide through her. The entire relationship, the whirlwind romance, the grand proposal. It was all an elaborate con. A long game set up for this very moment. I stumbled back into my room, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a wave of nausea. I looked at the dress hanging on my closet door, a tasteful maid of honor gown in seafoam green. Tomorrow, I was supposed to stand beside my sister and watch her pledge her life to this man. I was supposed to smile for pictures, give a toast, and celebrate the union of two people. How could I do that, knowing the groom was a blackmailer? But how could I not? The alternative was Emily's public humiliation and private agony. She was a gentle soul, a romantic who believed in fairy tales. This truth would not just break her heart, it would shatter her entire world. She had already lost our parents. Losing the man she loved on her wedding day in such a cruel fashion might be more than she could bear. My phone buzzed, a text from Leo, a Swiss bank account number and a SWIFT code. He was efficient, I'll give him that. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The analytical part of my brain, the data scientist, was screaming at me. This was a hostile actor introducing a critical vulnerability into a secure system. My system, my family, the protocol was clear. Identify the threat, isolate it, and neutralize it. But my heart, the part that had raised a little girl into a young woman, was screaming something else. Protect her at any cost. I walked over to the window and looked down at the beach. The staff had finished setting up the chairs, a neat grid of white facing the floral arch. It looked so perfect, so serene, an illusion, a beautiful lie. A whisper of doubt, a seed I had planted in my own mind months ago about Leo, was now a roaring gale. I had ignored the red flags, the designer clothes with no discernible income, the aversion to meeting my friends, the way he subtly isolated Emily from her own support system. I had written it off as my own overprotective nature. I was wrong. I had been so wrong. The wind coming off the ocean felt cold, carrying his poisonous whisper, "Pay up, or I will destroy her." At that moment, I knew I had to make a choice. In either way, the paradise was already lost, sleep was an impossibility. My mind was a frantic storm of calculations and moral dilemmas. I spent the night pacing my suite, the moonlit ocean offering no comfort, only a vast, indifferent darkness. Paying Leo felt like a surrender, an admission of defeat. It would validate his tactics and turn me into his accomplice. Yet, the image of Emily's broken heart was a powerful deterrent. By dawn, I had come to a grim conclusion. I couldn't let him destroy her, but I couldn't let him win either. I had to play his game, but on my own terms, at 7 a.m. I sent him a simple text. I will make the transfer. Send me an email with the wire instructions from your personal account to create a formal record of the request. It was a small, seemingly innocent request, but it was my first move. A data scientist knows the value of a paper trail. A text message can be disputed or deleted, but a formal email from his known address requesting a specific sum to a specific account was a piece of verifiable data. It was leverage. His reply was almost instant. Clever, fine. A minute later, the email arrived. It was brief and arrogant, as discussed. 50,000 US dollars. Details below. See you at the altar. I took a deep breath and initiated the wire transfer. The numbers leaving my account made me physically sick, but it was the price of admission. It bought me time. The wedding would proceed, Emily would be spared the immediate pain, and I would have the space to figure out my next move. For now, I had to put on the performance of my life. I went to Emily's suite, a bright smile plastered on my face. She was already in the makeup chair, glowing with excitement. Becca, she squealed, using my childhood nickname. Can you believe it? It's finally here. I can't. I said, my voice catching slightly. I hugged her tightly, burying my face in her hair to hide the tears welling in my eyes. You look beautiful, Em. Absolutely perfect. Is everything okay? She asked, sensing the emotion in my voice. Of course, I lied, pulling back and forcing the smile to return. Just emotional. My little sister is all grown up. The morning passed in a surreal haze. I helped her into her dress, a simple, elegant gown that flowed like liquid silk. I adjusted her veil. I told her how proud our parents would be. With every word of love and support, I felt like a fraud. I was propping up a fantasy that I knew was built on a foundation of lies and extortion. When I saw Leo dressed in a sharp linen suit, he gave me a subtle, triumphant nod. I returned it with a tight, unreadable smile. He thought he had won. He had no idea what he had started. The ceremony was beautiful, a picture, perfect scene from a magazine. Emily and Leo exchanged vows as the sun shone down, their words of eternal love and devotion turning my stomach. During the reception, I circulated among the guests, playing the part of the happy, proud older sister. I laughed, I accepted congratulations, and I watched Leo charm Emily's friends and my few invited colleagues. He was a masterful actor, playing the role of the adoring groom to perfection. One of those colleagues was Mark. Mark and I had worked together for years. He wasn't just a coworker, he was one of my closest friends. He was a senior cybersecurity analyst, a man whose entire career was dedicated to finding the hidden flaws in complex systems. He was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. As I watched Leo hold court, an idea began to form in my mind. I found Mark by the open bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. Quite the party, Rebecca, he said with a warm smile. Mark, I need your help, I said, my voice low and urgent. I pulled him aside, away from the music and the laughter, to a quiet corner of the pavilion. My composure was starting to crack. I'm in trouble. Something is very wrong with Leo. Mark's friendly expression immediately sobered. He was used to panicked people telling him their systems had been breached. He could read the genuine fear in my eyes. What's going on? I told him everything. The conversation on the balcony, the $50,000 demand, the blackmail, the wire transfer, the email. I laid it all out, the raw data of my nightmare. He listened patiently, his gaze intense, not interrupting once. When I finished, he was silent for a moment, swirling the ice in his glass. You did the right thing by getting the email, he said finally. That's our starting point. This guy isn't a fiancé, Rebecca. He's a social engineer, and a sloppy one if he used his personal email. He looked over at Leo, who was now laughing with Emily, his arm draped possessively around her. Mark's eyes narrowed. People like him, they always have a digital footprint. They think they're invisible, but they always leave ghosts in the machine. They build their polished surfaces on top of rotten foundations. He looked back at me, a grim determination on his face. We're going to find his foundation. We're going to look beneath the surface and see what's really there. When we get back to the mainland, you and I are going to do a deep dive. We'll find every skeleton, every lie, every scam. He picked the wrong person to blackmail. For the first time in 24 hours, a sliver of hope cut through my despair. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Mark's confidence was a lifeline. Leo thought he had targeted a sentimental, emotional woman he could easily manipulate. He didn't realize he had targeted a data scientist with a cybersecurity expert for a best friend. He had tried to hack my family, now we were going to hack him back. The honeymoon was a 2-week cruise through the Greek Isles. It gave me a fortnight, 2 weeks to turn my grief and anger into a weapon. The moment I landed back home, Mark was at my apartment. We turned my living room into a war room. My large dining table was covered with laptops, spare hard drives, and a whiteboard I'd dragged in from my home office. It felt familiar, like preparing for a major day to breach at work, except the compromised system was my sister's life. All right, Mark began, pulling up a chair. Rule 1. We operate completely off the grid, encrypted communications, virtual machines, and a VPN routed through 3 different continents. Leo sounds like an amateur, but we can't risk him getting spooked and disappearing. Our first target was the email. It was a simple Gmail address, but for Mark, it was a doorway. The email header contains the originating IP address. He explained, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He sent it from the resort's guest Wi-Fi, not smart, but it confirms he was the sender at that time and location. That's our anchor point. From there, we started building a profile. Leo's full name was Leonardo Vargas. He had minimal social media presence under that name. Just a polished LinkedIn profile listing vague successes as a founder and strategic investor at several companies that seemed to exist only on paper. There were no digital breadcrumbs, no tagged photos from friends, no history. It was too clean. This isn't a profile, it's a fabrication, Mark muttered, leaning closer to the screen. A man his age, this good-looking and supposedly successful, should have a much messier digital life. This is a carefully curated identity. So the question is, what is it hiding? My role was data aggregation and analysis. I started with public records, birth certificates, property deeds, court records, business filings. I built a script to scrape databases from different states, looking for any mention of Leonardo Vargas. For days we found nothing. It was like he had sprung into existence 2 years ago. He has to have a past. I said, frustration mounting. People don't just appear out of nowhere. Maybe not under that name, Mark countered. He started working on the photo from Leo's LinkedIn profile. He ran a facial recognition search, cross, referencing it against a massive database of images scraped from social media sites, news articles, and public forums. The algorithm churned for hours. We drank coffee, ate takeout, and barely spoke, each lost in our own digital rabbit hole. Then we got a hit. The algorithm flagged a match. It was a photo from a 5-year-old. It was a photo from a 5-year-old news article from a local paper in Florida. The man in the picture was younger, with a different hairstyle, but it was unmistakably him. The name in the article, however, was not Leonardo Vargas. It was Alex Thorne. The article was about a group of young men arrested for running a series of real estate investment scams, targeting elderly retirees. They would promise huge returns on fictitious property developments, take the investment money, and vanish. Alex Thorne, I read aloud, my voice low. The article says he was charged, but the charges were dropped. A key witness suddenly recanted their testimony. Paid off or intimidated, Mark said, already typing the new name into his search queries. This is our guy. He scrubbed his old identity, moved to a new state, and reinvented himself as Leonardo Vargas. Suddenly, the floodgates opened. Under the name Alex Thorne, there was a trail of debt, of lawsuits, of angry online reviews from people who had been swindled. We found his real family, a mother in a low-income housing unit in Miami who hadn't heard from him in years. We found 2 other women in different states who had posted on scam alert websites, describing a charming, handsome fiancé who had convinced them to invest in a can't-miss crypto opportunity before disappearing with their life savings. His methods were always the same: find a vulnerable target, build a fantasy, isolate them, and then extract as much money as possible. My sister wasn't the love of his life, she was just the next name on his list. And I wasn't just the protective older sister, I was the high-value financial target he had been grooming Emily to give him access to. The most damning evidence came from the Swiss bank account he'd had me wire the money to. Mark, through a contact in the international finance security community, was able to do a superficial trace. The account was not in Leo's name. It was a numbered account, but it had received several other large wire transfers over the past year, all from women, all just before the account was emptied. It was a professional money laundering setup. "He's a serial predator," I said, looking at the web of deceit we had mapped out on the whiteboard. The lines connecting names, dates, and bank accounts looked like a spider's web, and he's on a cruise ship with my sister right now. A cold, hard fury settled in my chest, replacing the fear and panic. My analytical mind took over completely. He dealt in lies and manipulation. I dealt in data and facts. His entire identity was a house of cards, and we had just found the bottom one. "He thinks he's untouchable," Mark said, looking at me. "He thinks he's smarter than everyone else." "He's not smarter," I replied, my eyes fixed on the board. "He's just ruthless, but data is more ruthless. Data doesn't care about charm. It doesn't get intimidated. It just is." I stood up and erased the whiteboard. Now we know who he is and what he does. It's time to build the trap. The plan had to be meticulous, multi-layered, and undeniable. It wasn't enough to expose Leo to Emily. A man like that was a master of gaslighting. He would twist the narrative, paint me as a jealous, controlling sister, and might even convince Emily that his past was a series of misunderstandings. No, I had to dismantle his entire existence so thoroughly that there was nothing left for him to hide behind. The goal wasn't just to get him out of Emily's life. It was to ensure he could never do this to anyone again. Our plan had 3 phases, each designed to corner him from a different direction: the financial, the legal, and the personal. Phase 1, the financial attack. This was my domain. He's motivated by greed. I explained to Mark, sketching out a flowchart. So we hit him where it hurts the most, his wallet. Using the information we'd gathered on his previous scams under the name Alex Thorne, I began to build a profile of his fraudulent investment schemes. They were always tech-related, full of buzzwords like blockchain, AI integration, and decentralized finance, designed to sound brilliant and impenetrable to his victims. I created a fake identity for myself, a wealthy, recently divorced heiress named Serafina Dubois, complete with a convincing social media footprint, a high-end web domain for a fictional family foundation, and a backstory of looking for aggressive, high-yield investment opportunities. Mark worked his magic, ensuring Serafina's digital presence was flawless. He bought an aged domain to make it look established and populated it with a year's worth of fake blog posts and philanthropic announcements. We created social media profiles with carefully curated photos, pictures of luxury travel and exclusive events, all generated by an AI image creator. Serafina Dubois looked like the perfect Mark, rich, a little naive about tech, and eager to make her own mark on the investment world. While Emily and Leo were still in Greece, I, as Serafina, made my move. I joined several exclusive online forums for net worth investors, forums I knew Leo frequented under his false name. I posted a query asking for recommendations for a fund manager specializing in emerging tech. As predicted, several of his online aliases responded. I engaged with the one that matched his digital dialect, the same smooth, confident tone he used in real life. Within days, Leonardo Vargas was in Serafina's inbox, pitching a revolutionary new AI-driven crypto trading platform. It was his standard scam repackaged. I played the part, asking just enough questions to seem intelligent, but not so many as to raise suspicion. I feigned excitement and told him I was looking to make a significant initial investment of $250,000. The bait was set. Leo, blinded by the size of the potential payday, took it hook, line, and sinker. He was so focused on landing his new whale that he became sloppy. He sent Serafina a prospectus from the same laptop he used for his personal affairs. Mark was waiting. Embedded in the PDF prospectus was a harmless-looking tracker. The moment Leo opened the file on his end to forward it, the tracker activated, giving Mark a direct line into his device. It wasn't a hack in the traditional sense. It was Leo willingly opening a door we had built. Through it, we could access his stored files, his browser history, his emails. It was a treasure trove of criminality. Phase 2, the legal wall. While I was luring him financially, Mark and I were compiling our evidence into a comprehensive dossier. We had everything: his real identity, testimonies from his past victims whom we contacted anonymously and encouraged to file new police reports, the paper trail of his scams, and now direct access to his ongoing criminal communications. We handed this dossier to David, my old family lawyer, the one who had helped me with my parents' estate. David was a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had known me and Emily since she was a child. He was horrified by what he read. "This isn't just a bad fiancé, Rebecca," he said, his face grim. "This is organized fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, interstate racketeering. He's looking at serious federal time." David began preparing the legal assault. He filed official police reports on my behalf regarding the extortion. He contacted the FBA Cybercrime Division, presenting them with a perfectly organized case file that would make their jobs easy. He also began drafting cease and desist letters and preparing for civil suits to reclaim the money he had stolen from his previous victims. The legal walls were closing in. Phase 3, the personal detonation. This was the most delicate part. I had to get the truth to Emily in a way that she would believe. I couldn't just show her a pile of documents. Leo would dismiss it as a fabrication. I needed him to condemn himself out of his own mouth. Using our access to his laptop, Mark set up a program to secretly record his screen and audio whenever certain keywords were typed or spoken. Words like Serafina, investment, wire transfer, and the names of his past victims. Leo was scheduled to have a final video call with Serafina to close the $250,000 deal. The call was set for the day after he and Emily returned from their honeymoon. Emily thought it was a regular business call. I told her I wanted to throw them a small welcome home party that evening at my apartment. My real plan was to make that party the stage for his final performance. The trap was woven. Every digital thread, every legal document, every personal connection was a strand in a web of his own making. He was walking towards the center, completely oblivious, lured by the promise of his biggest score yet. He thought he was the spider. He was about to find out he was the fly. The day they returned, the air in my apartment was thick with tension. Emily was tanned and beaming, chattering excitedly about ancient ruins and sunset dinners. She was blissfully unaware that her husband was in my home office, on a video call that would determine the rest of his life. Leo had walked in with his usual swagger, giving me a smug look that said, "See, I have her, and I have your money. You lost." He had no idea. Mark was with me in the living room, monitoring a live feed from Leo's laptop on his own tablet. We watched as Serafina's face appeared on the screen, a deepfake avatar Mark had created, her voice synthesized but convincingly human. "Leonardo, it's a pleasure to finally put a face to the name," the avatar said in a smooth, cultured voice. "The pleasure is all mine, Serafina," Leo replied, his voice oozing charm. "I'm excited to partner with your foundation. This algorithm is going to change the world." Mark and I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs. The script was set. Before I authorized the transfer of the initial $250,000, Serafina said, "My legal team has a few final due diligence questions, just a formality." She began to ask him about his past ventures. She used the names of the shell companies we had uncovered. Leo, thinking he was impressing her with his portfolio, eagerly elaborated on his successes. He was, in effect, happily confessing to his previous scams. Then came the kill shot. My team also flagged a past legal issue under a different name. And Alex Thorne, Serafina asked casually. They said the charges were dropped, but I need to know what it was about. We watched Leo's face on the monitor. For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed his features. His smile tightened. An old misunderstanding. He said, waving a dismissive hand, "A business partner who got cold feet. It was nothing. And these women." Serafina continued, her voice hardening slightly as she listed the names of his other victims. "They also seem to have had misunderstandings with you to the tune of several $100,000. Leo's composure shattered. He started to sweat. "This is ridiculous. My personal life has nothing to do with this investment." "It does when your personal life is your business model," Serafina retorted. The final piece of the trap was about to spring. One last thing, a smaller transaction, $50,000 wired from a Rebecca Miller a couple of weeks ago. Was that also an investment? Leo froze. He looked like a deer in the headlights. The feed showed his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. He was caught. At that exact moment, I walked into the home office. Emily followed me, a plate of appetizers in her hand. "Leo, honey, Becca made your favorite." Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on his face. On the large monitor on my wall, which I had synced to Leo's screen, the video call was being projected for all to see. The deepfake Serafina was gone, replaced by a grid of faces, the faces of the other women Leo had scammed. I had found them, and they had agreed to be a part of this. One by one, they spoke. He told me he loved me. The first woman said, her voice shaking with anger, he took my retirement savings. He proposed to me, too, said another. Then he disappeared with the money I'd inherited from my father. Leo stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He stared at the screen, then at me. The mask of the charming fiancé was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of a cornered rat. "What is this?" He snarled at me. "What did you do?" "I did my research," I said, my voice cold and steady. I turned to Emily, who was standing paralyzed in the doorway, the plate having slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion and horror. I said softly, "I'm so sorry, but this is who he is." I played the final piece of evidence, the audio recording from the balcony in Hawaii. His voice filled the room, clear and cruel. "Pay the 50,000, or I vanish. Imagine Emily standing at that beautiful altar tomorrow all alone." The color drained completely from Emily's face. She looked at Leo, her fairy tale crumbling to dust around her. The man she loved, the man she had just married, was a stranger, a monster. "Leo," she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing, "is that true?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He knew he was beaten. He had no more lies to tell. The doorbell rang. 2 uniformed police officers and a plain-clothed detective stood on my doorstep. David, my lawyer, was right behind them. Leonardo Vargas, also known as Alex Thorne. The detective asked, looking past me at Leo, "You're under arrest for wire fraud and extortion." As they cuffed him, Leo's eyes met mine one last time. They were filled not with remorse, but with rage. He had been outplayed at his own game. The data scientist had run the numbers, and his time was up. They led him away, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The storm had passed, leaving my sister's life in wreckage, but the foundation, though shaken, was still standing. We were still standing. The aftermath was not a celebration. There was no triumphant feeling, no sense of victory. There was only the quiet, messy work of picking up the pieces. Leo's arrest set off a legal firestorm. The evidence we had compiled was so overwhelming that the FBI took over the case. Faced with a mountain of proof and multiple state and federal charges, he had no choice but to cooperate. He took a plea deal that would keep him in prison for the next 15 years. The other women he had scammed would get some restitution from his seized assets, though it could never replace what they had truly lost. My $50,000 was returned as part of the legal proceedings. When the money reappeared in my account, I felt nothing. It was just data again. Its power to harm us was gone. The hardest part was Emily. For the first few weeks, she was a ghost in my apartment. She barely ate, barely spoke. She spent her days wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall. Her grief was profound, not just for the man she thought she loved, but for the future she thought she had. She was mourning a life that had never been real. I didn't push her. I just sat with her, sometimes in silence, sometimes watching old movies from our childhood. I made her soup. I reminded her to drink water. I took a leave of absence from work and focused on the one day, to point that had always mattered most, my sister. I was her guardian again, but this time I wasn't shielding her from the world. I was helping her heal from it. Slowly, she began to emerge from the fog. One afternoon, she finally spoke about it. "Was any of it real?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Did he ever care about me at all?" "I think he cared about what you represented," I answered honestly. "In his twisted mind, you were the prize. The problem for him is that he never realized the prize wasn't your connection to my money. The prize was just you, Em, and he was too stupid and too hollow to ever understand that." She cried then, a deep, cathartic cry that seemed to release weeks of pent-up pain. I held her, just as I had when she was 10 years old and woke up from a nightmare. The healing was a slow process. David handled the annulment, wiping the marriage from the legal record as if it had never happened. Emily started seeing a therapist who helped her untangle the complex web of manipulation and emotional abuse she had endured. She started drawing again, her sketchbooks filling with images that were dark and chaotic at first, but gradually became brighter, more hopeful. About 6 months later, Emily made a decision. She wanted to leave the city. She wanted a fresh start, a place with no memories of Leo. She decided to transfer to an art school in Oregon she had always admired. I helped her pack up her things, and we took a road trip across the country to get her settled. It felt like a reversal of my journey into adulthood. Instead of bringing her into my home to protect her, I was taking her out into the world to set her free. As I stood in her new sunlit apartment, surrounded by boxes and art supplies, she hugged me, her grip strong and sure. "Thank you, Becca," she said, "not just for all of that, but for everything, for raising me, for always being my safe place. Always, I promised." I drove back home alone, but I didn't feel lonely. My quiet apartment no longer felt like just a sanctuary. It felt like a home base, a place of strength I could operate from. My work, which had once been a means to provide for Emily, now felt like an extension of who I was. I had used my skills to protect my family, to fight back against the chaos with logic and data. It had given me a new sense of purpose. The following weekend, Mark came over for dinner. We sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. We didn't talk about Leo. We talked about work, about a new project I was excited about a hiking trip he was planning. It was easy and comfortable, you know. He said, looking out at the skyline, "What you did was incredible. You didn't just get angry. You got organized. You built a better system and beat him with it. I had help." I said, smiling at him. The whole ordeal had changed me. I had learned that my greatest strengths were not just my analytical mind, but my love for my sister and my trust in a good friend. Leo had seen that love as a weakness to exploit, a variable he could use to his advantage. But he was wrong. In the end, it was the most powerful force in the entire equation. It was the one thing his calculations could never account for. As I looked out at the dark sky, I knew a new day was coming. A new sunrise, clear and bright and full of possibilities.